Hello, welcome to the Dragon Plus live stream. I am your host, as always, Bart Carroll. This week, we'll be talking to two parties involved with this year's D&D Extra Life adventure and Skyped in at the moment. We have the illustrious, no pun intended, designer, cartographer, artist extraordinaire, Claudio Pozas. So welcome to the Dragon Plus live stream, Claudio.
Hi, Bart. Thanks for having me. Hi, everyone in Twitch land.
So for folks who might not be familiar, you probably are if you've picked up any of the Dungeons & Dragons books, but if you're not familiar with Claudio, and I'm pulling this, as I said beforehand, shamelessly from your bio, but I'll pretend that I wrote it. Born in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, he has been drawing for as long as he can remember. His first influences were Disney comics, followed by little-known stuff like Star Wars and He-Man. There wasn't a scrap of paper in his parents' home without a scribbled of either a sailor duck, a spacesuit samurai with a red laser sword, or a tiger riding barbarian fighting a muscular lich. But when he was in the 7th grade, he met the hobby that would change his life forever, Dungeons & Dragons. Does that sound like a fair assessment of your introduction to D&D and a bit of so let me ask that: how did you become involved in Dungeons and Dragons and sort of marrying love of design, love of art with D&D?
Professionally?
Let's say personally first.
I started playing. When I was in the seventh grade, yeah. I saw a kid during recess with what I would later know to be the AD&D 1E Player's Handbook with the Jeff Easley cover.
Yeah.
And he lived close to my place, so after school we went there, and I flipped through his books, and I recognized some stuff from the D&D cartoon, which wasn't called D&D here in Brazil. What? So I started playing that day and haven't stopped since.
What was it called if it wasn't called the Dungeons & Dragons cartoon?
Dragon's Cave.
Yeah, all right.
And the Dungeon Master was the Master of Magicians.
So close, but just enough apart to make it a little distinct, I guess.
And then I started professionally. I wrote an article for the last Dragon magazine of 2nd edition. And then during 3rd edition, I started working on third-party publishers. The first one was Fiery Dragon. We started doing the counter collections with the little square counters for everything that was in the game. I did over 3,000 of those.
Oh.
Yes. And once 4th edition rolled around, I started sending pitches for Dragon articles. And then I got one for Clerics of Serhanin Mumbo, the goddess. In 4th edition, she was the goddess of secrets and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And freedom, stuff like that. And a few months later, I worked with Merles on Heroes of Shadow and with Rodney Thompson on Heroes of the Feywild. And when 5th edition came around, I was in the alpha playtest groups, and I started doing art for the Player's Handbook and the Dungeon Master Guide. And the rest, as they say, is history. Shut up.
And we spoke with you actually back in Dragon Plus issue 13, because you had among the projects that you had worked on for Dungeons and Dragons was the reimagining, or I guess the conversion of White Plume Mountain for Tales from the Yawning Portal.
Yes, and that was I love doing homages to the history of D&D. So when I get a commission from Kate Irwin, who's awesome, by the way. Hi, Kate. I always go into my library here at home to check what was done before, to check the old stuff, check what previous artists did, with those creatures or with the adventure per se. So for that adventure, I made a point of including Arrow Otis' signature on the next to mine in the map for White Blue Mountain, because it was all built on his work. All we do is built on previous contributors to Dungeons and Dragons.
We were just showing up a couple of pieces of your art that appeared in Tales from the Yawning Portal. And there's a couple of more, I think, that we have of some of the models that you used to create the material. So when we talked with you back in Dragon Plus 13, it seemed like you were using physical materials to create references for the works that you were doing.
A lot of artists that work in what we call imaginative realism, which is the art style that D&D is mostly known for, we try to create stuff that does not exist and make it look like it does. So having a physical reference always enriches whatever we imagined in our minds. Because as much as I might know about hammers or a trident or stuff like that, there's always something that you can, some input that you can get from a prop, how light reflexes or how the shadows are cast from a hammer on a pile of coins, like Whelm in Tales of the Yawning Portal.
And we've got a couple, I think it was yourself modeling Tanis in a piece of art as well.
Yes, I've been Tanis Half-Elven in a previous illustration. I've been locked in a dungeon of a Sorcerer King in Dark Sun. I've been around, man. I've been around.
Well, I've appreciated your art, so as we're going to speak about in a little bit, it was a great pleasure to be working with you for the adventure material we were putting together for this year's Extra Life. But before we get into that, I did want to ask for Inktober. I was following on social media that you were doing a bit of added work for Inktober. How did that go? You were mentioning beforehand.
Inktober is my nemesis. I always start Inktober trying to, have an excuse to use actual ink instead of just doing stuff digitally. And something happens, life happens, elections happen, and then it peters out. So I did a couple dragons, I did a wizard, and then blah, it fell apart. In previous years, I did Orktober. Last year, I was doing one orc every day. And about 3 years ago, I was doing Drawloween, which was a horror-themed month of illustrations on social media.
All right.
But
I like
that
it.
never got past, I don't know, the 15th, 20th.
Well, an ink drawing a day for 31 days is that's ambitious. So I admire the fact that you would just attempt the feat whatsoever. So, and it was fun to watch on social media, no matter what.
Thank you.
So for Extra Life, we approached you. We asked you. We had an adventure that we had in the works, and we needed a couple of maps for it. So a little bit different from illustrations necessarily. So I wanted to ask, when you're approaching cartography versus illustration, is that a different consideration for you? Is it a different approach or different tools, or is it really different?
That's where my gamer side comes out the most.
Yeah.
More than my artist side, because one of my favorite books in second edition was the campaign sourcebook / catacomb guide, which was one of those little blue books that had was a line of Dungeon Master accessories that we had for 2E And the campaign source book Catacomb Guide was 2 books in one, with the Catacomb Guide being essentially how to make maps, written by Dave C. Sutherland III, which was one of the greatest early voices in D&D. And he passed away several years ago, which is a shame. But I always kept his lessons from that book at heart. So when I was approached to do the maps for Extra Life, which is an honor, by the way, to help such a cause, I wanted to do them in isometric view. So there's some illustrative aspect to it, instead of just being a top-down dungeon or top-down structure, which might be sometimes more practical for round-to-round movement. But since Extra Life was supposed to be broadcast through the internet for online play, I figured some sort of illustrative map would be more interesting for whoever was watching.
So we had 2 maps that we asked you to make. I'm jumping to the second one. The first map, as you mentioned, for Extra Life, we had, and we'll be talking to them actually in the second half of the hour for folks viewing, Dustin Fletcher and Devin Henderson. They were running the second part of the adventure. There's 2 parts of the adventure. You can run them in any order. So they were running the second part of the adventure in the city of Daywin Gloween. And that was the map that they were playing through. This Saturday at Gamehole Con, Chris Perkins will be running folks through the first part of the adventure at the other location. So for the
other location,
I know. I had a lot of fun coming up with the map, or the art orders for these. So, so this is essentially what for the second map, what I passed your way. So for the city of Daywin Gloween, it's essentially a valley city, various keyed areas, of course, a little smaller and less complex than the lost city of Omu map, which we were using as sort of a conceptual reference for general look and feel for the visuals. The city of Daywin Gloween has long been thought of as mere legend. Occasionally, travelers would return from the mountains with wild claims that Daywin Gloween was populated by creatures made of living glass, tended to by Kenku in love with their shining beauty. And we did give you a few more details. We talked about the stone towers and the glass statuary and the strange gleam. But when you get an art order, something like that, is that sufficient for your needs, or is there more detail that you tend to look for? How do you approach the start of a project once you get an art order, whether it's this one or anything else?
First, I try to gather as much reference as I can for, in the case of this town, it was the architecture. I asked you online if it was like a medieval town with a tower here and there, or if it was more packed like Manhattan.
Yeah.
And you said, yeah, more like Manhattan. So that gave me a frame of reference to build from. The important thing is that we all start from the same baseline. So I know what you have on your mind already because you wrote the art order. And then I take the ball and run from there. Because otherwise I'll come up with something that is completely extraneous to what you were imagining before. The other map of the odd location, I gave you like 5 or 6 examples of, is this more like this, like this? Like, I gave you a range of looks, and you pointed me in the right direction.
I know we're both being coy. I've mentioned in previous live streams that the adventure overall takes place in the Barrier Peaks. So map 2, we do have a bit of a ruined city the other map location definitely has a bit of a science fiction feel and element to it as well. So we're excited to show that off on Saturday and see how that plays out. But yeah, and that conversation, kind of going to that map, which we're not showing, but talking about, it was a lot of fun to sort of talk through, well, okay, exactly what shade of science fiction are we going for here? And you had some great details, and sort of you put in your own storytelling into the map itself, which was super cool to see.
Once I start making the map, I have to make decisions that sometimes involve the daily lives of whoever lives there. Or I did a map several years ago for Kate Irwin for Dungeon magazine. I don't think it came out. I think the adventure was never actually published. But sometimes you have to put a couple of houses in a town, and who lives in these parts of town? These houses are a bit farther away, so the people who live here, they kind of don't like their neighbors. They live off on their own. So you have to start imagining, oh, maybe this guy is a leather tanner or a fishmonger, and the area around those houses smell badly, and they were forced to move in that direction. For Darwin Gloin, I had to come up with the kind of architecture that would allow for towers with terraces on top of them, because it's not a modern city, so they won't have those, New York City type water towers on top of buildings, or fire escape ladders running outside the buildings, and it's ruined. So you have to not only come up with the architecture, but you have to break it down and then fill it with vines and overgrowth. I actually looked at some stills from a TV series from a few years back called The World After Us.
Oh, yes, of course, yes.
Which shows how the world, cities and stuff like that would look 10, 50, 100 years after humanity suddenly disappeared. So roads break down, cement structures start crumbling, and plants start growing in the cracks because the wind brings seeds and dirt, and then rain makes those seeds bloom, and then you start having vertical forests in a city that would otherwise be just a bunch of stone and metal structures. So you have to take that into consideration as well.
So yeah, I mean, it was great having those conversations with you. I mean, even though it was sparse and on email, but just seeing the stories that you were putting into the maps was great. And
I wanted to say stuff about the first map, but we'll save that for later.
No, I actually pulled out your comments in email because we're going to do a little article in Dragon Plus, and I thought the storytelling about excavating down and uncovering little bits of the science fiction building, I thought that was so
it's
perfect.
So we can say it's a science fiction building.
Yes.
So
location. Let's say location.
Yeah, it's a science fiction location in a fantasy medieval world. So one thing that came to mind to me is that it's kind of a science fiction haunted house, because stuff happens that the current inhabitants have no control over, because it's stuff that was programmed by whoever built that sci-fi structure hundreds of years in the past. So they are still living with decisions made by people who have been dead for centuries.
Right.
So kind of having science fiction ghosts. So this door opens at this time of the day, or those lights start glowing every 17 days, or machinery comes to life once a month for whatever purpose, and then whoever inhabits might start using those routines for their own purpose. So if a heavy door that has been damaged, it goes up and then down, 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 down for like half an hour a day. Though those inhabitants might use that to, I don't know, chop up metal or crush stones into gravel to pave roads and stuff like that. And so they are kind of repurposing those routines that have been programmed by the original builders of the location, and they're kind of living with echoes of the past. It's like having science fiction ghosts.
That's the best kind of ghost, is the science fiction ghost. I feel like we just got started talking, and we're already getting close to the bottom of the hour. I did want to again reiterate that the adventure is coming out on the DM's Guild first. We're titling it The Lost Laboratory of Qualish, so you can look for that coming up. I believe by the end of the week we'll have that dropped on there. Claudio's 2 maps will be in that adventure as well. Before we go, I did want to ask where folks can find more of your work and more of your art. Where should they look for you?
The hub to find me online is my website, which is www.claudiopozas.com, CLAUDIOPOZAS.com. And there you'll find links to my Facebook, my Twitter, my Instagram, and whatever passes for my Pinterest. I don't know why I have a Pinterest. I've never seen anything in that.
I have one too. I don't know why. I've used it just to pin visual ideas for various projects.
Yes, but now I get sometimes a friend posts a photograph that is a really good reference on Facebook.
Yeah.
And now I just save it on Facebook in a reference folder. So Pinterest became obsolete for me.
So folks can find Claudio's work right there on his website. And again, we had kind of talked about this for a future version. Half an hour is not nearly long enough, and we liked being able to chat with you and see your work. So we wanted to make sure that in a future Dungeons and Doodles, we'd find a way where we could remotely have you participate, if that sounds like a good call for you.
I'm all for it.
And we won't wait until Inktober or Orktober or Drawoween next year, but sooner than that.
Yes, please.
Well, thank you. I know you're staying up late, and I appreciate the late nights for you. I didn't realize that your time zone was so many hours ahead of Seattle. The East-West.
Just started daylight savings on Sunday.
Yes.
So it's now 6 hours ahead.
Okay. Yeah, we did daylight savings on Sunday as well. So, but
yeah. So you guys moved it 1 hour back, and I moved it 1 hour forward.
So we went in opposite directions.
Yes. I live in the future. You people are quaint.
Well, it's again for the Barrier Peaks. The future is very apropos. So, well. Well, thank you, Claudio, and again, look for his maps in the Lost Laboratory of Qualish, hitting the DM's Guild for the D&D Extra Life Adventure. We are going to take a short break. We're going to Skype in Dustin and Devin, 2 gentlemen who ran a bit of the adventure as part of their Extra Life preview. So don't go away. We're going to come back and talk to Dustin and Devin shortly. And thanks again to Claudio. We'll have him on again soon for Dungeons and Doodles, hopefully very soon.
Bye, Bart. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're back. We're back with part 2 of the Dragon Plus live stream. I'm still your host, Bart Carroll, and we have 2 new guests. We have Dustin Fletcher and Devin Henderson. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining the Dragon Plus live stream. And refreshing the screen right now. And just wanted to mention that you both ran as co-DMs a bit of the D&D Extra Life adventure we were talking to in the first part of the show. Claudio created the maps for it, and as part of your Extra Life day, you were running one of the parts. The parts are sort of interchangeable, and so you were running, I guess, technically part 2 for Daywing Glowing.
We did.
And
yeah.
So before we jump into how that went, Dustin, I know we saw you at the Stream of Many Eyes earlier in the year.
You did, and I was incredible. The set was beautiful. I came on as the costume coordinator,
yes.
Helped everyone get ready and made sure everything ran smoothly on the Waterdeep side of things. And it was incredible, amazing experience. And that set it was incredible.
That was fun. Kudos to Greg Tito and company for everyone for pulling that together. But it was great to see everyone there and celebrating D&D. So of course I also wanted to ask, leading into Extra Life, how you sort of got your start in the hobby of Dungeons and Dragons. What led to now live streaming D&D for charity? Where was the genesis?
I actually first started with a long time ago with first off, the D&D cartoon was my first introduction way back when.
Yes.
And then that led into Baldur's Gate, which great friends at Beamdog now kind of took over and are doing. And then from there went into 3rd edition and kind of played from there and moved all the way up 4th and now 5th edition. And that's ever since I think the late 80s is when I first started, when I was knee-high to a grasshopper learning how to do it.
Hey everybody, I'm Devin. I'm the other half of D4. I got into D&D from my older brother when I was about 12. I've always been huge into fantasy and huge into horror, and you might see a little bit of horror interlaced into our version of Waterdeep. But just going through, I started with 2nd edition, tried to play a little bit of 3 and 4, didn't really like it, got into Pathfinder, but we've fallen really in love with 5th edition. The interlacing between mechanics and roleplay built in, it's super easy to pick up and a lot of fun to run. But other than that, for running things, Dustin and I helped run a LARP for 9-10 years.
9-10 years, yeah.
Yeah, so we just wanted to continue telling stories.
Those sound like 2 of the very common ways that people get into the hobby. Claudio himself was mentioning the D&D cartoon, and then the older sibling, the older kid in the neighborhood definitely is another way that... And reason I bring that up specifically is because now I think more and more, instead of the older sibling, a lot of it is watching live streams, and folks are able to see the hobby, see how it's played through, the different styles of Dungeon Master and co-DMing. You can always go onto Twitch and see great examples of that, and sort of get a bit of an education about how the game can be played. The different ways that people do play it. So I'm kudos to you both for continuing sort of the D&D live streaming endeavors for other folks to get into the hobby.
Yeah, I mean, we became inspired from, the greats like Critical Role, Dice Camera Action. I mean, Matt and Perkins alone are just such incredible DMs, and hold a close space in our hearts as we draw inspiration from their storytelling. And we've always loved to tell stories, and I've always DM'd and he's DM'd, and so we decided to just come together, and we've told stories together before, and so just to continue to do that, and now to do it live, to bring our stories to everyone else is just it introduced D&D to the community, especially to those who and as we get into later, I had 2 players this weekend, Sunday for the Extra Life event, who had never played before ever, and that to me is everything, is to introducing the game to them for the first time. You know, my kids are 9 and 10, and they play, and that's just, I love it, and happy to continue to bring that.
Yeah, the two guests that we had that were first-time players, they were playing at a 20th level, so we threw them to the wolves.
Yep.
And they instantly got into character, and they were at the end of it. They were like, "Where's a campaign? Because I want to play."
Yep.
And it was really heartwarming to hear all of that.
So on Sunday, you were co-DMs for the Extra Life, one of the Extra Life adventures. How did that work? Was this a practice you've done before? Are there considerations that you have to have in mind for co-DMing versus just, you know, regular DMing?
We're still ironing out the kinks because this is a little different than on live stream than it was at a LARP, which is where we did most of our co-DMing. But we play off each other really well. I do a lot of the writing. He's really great at improv, and we just kind of weave it all together. And just kind of go back and forth, so it's not one person taking over all of the information and one person doing all of combat. We do both.
Yeah, it helps things go smoother, and then, you know, when there's multiple NPCs, we can talk to each other instead of one person doing all the voices, so we kind of bounce and play off of each other, and that's really it is. It's more into that yes and improv, you know, means we have a script, you know, of stuff written out, but also, you know, the players are gonna do something that we don't plan for. It's gonna happen. It always does, and that's kind of where I shine, and I kind of take over, and we just work and mesh and work well to each other, you know, and we'll nudge each other under the table, you know, if like we want someone else to take over, and kind of, you know, those like little subtle cues that no one sees at the table. That way it helps us just kind of flow and keep things going and keep things smooth. And it's a learning process, and we'll continue to learn as we go, and the more that we play and run things.
I like that. You like develop a system of secret hand signals to give one another without anyone noticing.
It's mostly elbow bumps and knee nudges. Yeah.
So for Sunday, and let me just say again, I was super grateful that you were willing to run through the Extra Life adventure that we put together. It was super satisfying to see that in action, and I'm personally very appreciative of that. You had a goal for Extra Life to raise $500 during the day, and how close did you get?
Well, we met that about halfway through our first game.
Yeah, so during the campaign, The Lost Laboratory of Qualish, we reached our goal, which was amazing. We were like, wow, if we could reach 1,000 by the end of the day, that would be awesome.
That would be great. And throughout the day, we kept hitting our goal and kept having to raise it.
We met 500 first game, 1,000 second game, 2,000
the third game,
and then all the way up to $5,005 by the final game, which was a hilarious thing. Paranoia run by one of our players.
It was. I mean, we were the entire time as we kept going and meeting things.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole place where we were running the game at Meeple Madness, and it was just everyone was like screaming and cheering and getting into it, and I'm like, the fact. I mean, 500 to 5,000, we're speechless, still speechless. I'm still like, I can't believe that happened. I was like, if we raise 500, awesome. If we get to 1,000, that's even better, and far surpass that.
For our first stream, we were like, if we get a constant 10 viewers and up to $500, we're going to feel great because we raised money for children. And I think we had an average around 50, our highest was like 68 viewers.
Something like that. For no one ever seeing us before and us coming on, and I think that's pretty darn good.
But our biggest, proudest moment is raising over $5,000.
Yep.
Yes, I would say thanks and congratulations as well for that. We've said it along the way. It's for a truly great cause. We appreciate the efforts you put in. For folks watching the stream as well, thank you so much for everything you've done. Folks watching have taken part in their own D&D endeavors as part of Extra Life. They've watched, they've donated, or just supported everyone or spread the word. It is going for a great cause. So thanks everyone for everything that's been going on to date. We do have a few more activities coming up this weekend. We've got Gamehole Con going on in Madison, Wisconsin. D&D Beyond will be carrying 6 games Friday and Saturday. We'll be hosting those on the D&D channel as well. Chris Perkins on the Saturday night game will be running the other part of Lost Laboratory of Qualish, I believe. And so it'll be exciting to see how that goes through as well.
We'll be at GameholeCon as well. So we'll both be there to coming out to hang out and again help support everybody and continue to push the Extra Life event. So we'll also be there and to promote our upcoming stream. So we cannot wait for that as well. So
yeah, and if you watch our stream, feel free to ask us any questions, give us comments, concerns, and we'll talk about the Extra Life campaign one-on-one with you guys.
Yep.
So speaking of, why don't we just mention that? When will you be live streaming on the regular, and how can folks tune in?
So we will be starting January 6th. Will be our first official start of our campaign. We will be starting with Dragon Heist, and that'll kind of lead into a little bit of Mad Mage, and then we'll probably take it and carry it on to our own writing, but probably staying within Waterdeep and within Faerun for sure. And then we will be 7 p.m. Eastern time, so that'll be 4 p.m. Pacific time, and that will be at twitch.tv/rockpunchatl.
Sundays at 4 for you guys, and Sundays at 7 for us.
7 for us, yep. Because we're over here on the East Coast down in Atlanta, so holding the East Coast side down here. In the old Atlanta.
Old Yollywood.
Yep, so ATLywood.
I have fond memories of Fort Benning, Georgia. So
yes.
Awesome.
Awesome.
That's going to be a little bit of a trek. That's a different climate going from Atlanta to Madison, Wisconsin in November. Are you ready for that?
It's not going to be too cold. But we'll pack some cold weather here.
Well, thank you, Bart, because I actually had not even thought about that.
Right. Just stay in the convention. No, it's not going to be too terrible, but yes, the convention center will be nice and toasty. So speaking of the adventure, the Extra Life adventure, I'll give the little description that we wrote up again. This will be dropping on the DMs Guild later this week, probably right before Chris Perkins runs his part. Lost Laboratory of Qualish explores an alternate expedition into the Barrier Peaks. We've been mentioning that in past streams with Jeremy Crawford. The legendary inventor disappeared in the peaks eons ago, as it turns out, finding a crashed planar ship and studying its technology to fuel his own experiments. Only now, Qualish's lost research is desperately needed. So in the adventure, characters go on an expedition, the Barrier Peaks areas, try and find Qualish the inventor. In the package that we're putting together for the DMs Guild, it's got the 2 locations as mentioned: new monsters, magic items, spells, sci-fi trinkets, random encounters, rumors of the area that were submitted by the player community, art maps from Claudio, who we spoke with earlier, a cartoon from Jason Thompson, even the famed suit of powered armor as edited by Jeremy Crawford on the Dragon Plus live stream. One of the pieces of art, and I was incredibly thrilled to see this when we were talking about setting up for your game. You guys went the added extra mile. You've been working on terrain. You've been working on minis for the game as well. We're going to, I think, show some of the terrain that you created for the game on the screen at the moment. But how do you go about creating terrain? Are you starting with pre-purchased? Are you crafting your own? Is it a combination thereof? Or how did you make these awesome things?
Glad you asked. There's many tutorials online that we came across, and DM Scotty, Black
Magic Design,
Wylock, all those guys are great terrain builders, and they're great for the community, for people that want to build things on the cheap. Production designer?
Production coordinator?
Production coordinator. Yep. Yeah, he has a 3D printer, and so we were able to print some custom buildings and things like that. But
it's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. We do build our own out of foam and little tiny things and whatnot, and kind of making our own, sculpting it and making our own maps. And then we'll use 3D printed elements. We'll use terrain that Wizards puts out with WizKids. We kind of just take everything that we think fits the scene that we're trying to portray, the map that we're trying to portray, and just make it as immersive as we can so that the players can look at it and go, all right, that is a place that is a torture chamber with chains on the walls, and that is definitely where, there's even blood splattered on the ground. This is all the stuff that we kind of add, those little subtle details. We both work in the film industry, and so we kind of take that element and we put it into our maps. And that's what we love to do. We are visual people. We are you see what you see, two guys who, theater of their mind is great and we can weave a story, but to set that down and actually show both the players and the audience of this is what you see, that's what we do and what we always will do for even going into our stream in January.
Yeah, we want to show a lot of the average players in the sense of like not a company playing this, but friends around a table, that you can make terrain with stuff lying around your house if you just watch these videos online, and you can have just as much immersion as we do, with a fraction of the cost of a lot of other things that are out there.
I think it speaks, obviously I'm an advocate for Dungeons & Dragons, but I think it speaks to one of the facets of the game, crafting the adventure, running the adventure, playing the adventure, but also crafting material for your game nights as well is another component to it, which is a lot of fun for a lot of people. And even just seeing what other people create, what you've created, it's a joy to behold and see what you guys are doing. I was going to ask, so is there more in the works as you're running your campaign? As that's come up and running, will you be creating more material for it?
Absolutely. In fact, we are currently building every map in Dragon Heist 3D. And so we will have any and every map that they go onto, we are literally putting together and building. Even as we speak, we've already begun building and construction, and we finished a good bit of those. So we can't wait to bring those out in January.
Yeah.
It's exciting to see. And kind of going back, speaking of the visual side of things, you guys were also in very elaborate costume for the Sunday game as well.
Well, we are. We love to dress up. We're cosplayers and LARPers at heart, and so any excuse we can get to throw in a costume, we will 100% do it. Back at Gen Con, I did Vecna, and he did a Death Knight, and full plate mail, head to toe, 80 pounds, 100 pounds of plate.
About 80, but
and it's just that's anytime we can dress up, we're gonna do it. The second game we ran after the Extra Life Lost Laboratory Quash was a pirate game, so we were all dressed as pirates and had the entire table dressed as pirates, and so it was so much fun. As that game started off with half the players in a noose on the gallows, caught for our crimes like true pirates are. And it was a lot of fun. So
try and escape.
Try. Yep. Starts out. All right, you're in a noose. Have fun. Escape.
So I guess same question in the live stream coming up. Can we expect more awesome costumes from you both?
Yeah. And for maybe not as we go Halloween for sure. If we ever do a live show, 100% we will most definitely be in costume, dressed up. We actually have a photo shoot coming up with the cast and us, and we're doing costumes for that as well. So we'll be able to see a bunch of that, and all of our cast loves to dress up too. So we're super excited to do all that.
I was going to ask, considering we just came out of Halloween, favorite costumes that you've dressed up as for Halloween, past or present, or that you may have seen around?
Oh man, Halloween. I did. It's funny because we do so much work for cons. Halloween is kind of
cons, and there's a big haunted house down here. You may have heard of it, called Netherworld. That's typically where I am on Halloween.
Yep, dressing up, scaring people. I did my pirate this year for Halloween. Last year I did a Iceman, which was Iceman from Top Gun as Iceman from X-Men. Where I had ice on my face and the jumpsuit, but with the X-Men symbols all on it. That was kind of one of my fun ones that I did.
You'll see us dressed up at PAX.
Yeah, we'll be dressed up as PAX, as the gentleman in Pumat Soul from Critical Role, which we did at Gen Con, but we'll be at that at PAX Unplugged as well. So we'll both be there as well. So.
Awesome. Let's talk a little bit more about Sunday. Just curious. I was tuning in to make sure things were going well, and I was following along. But how, in general, how did the adventure go for you? How did the party manage to get through a bit of the Lost Laboratory of Koalas?
Well, because our players are really big role players, and we were playing a bunch of randomly generated characters.
Yeah, that's another thing. All of our players on Sunday randomly generated and even had donations to build their characters. So going into the game, they were playing random class, random race, random alignment. Half of our party was actually lawful evil, which was very entertaining.
Yeah.
In fact, and I don't think we did a single combat
because of all the role play that happened.
All the role play that happened leading up to it.
So we had to cut out a whole lot, but we ended up in the garage.
We ended up in the garage,
and they released Tenmir. So, and that's how we ended it.
Yep. And so I don't want to go into too much details. I mean, you can watch it for sure, but definitely don't want to spoil too much for those who are going to buy it.
Yes.
The adventure coming out. So, but you can definitely watch and see the craziness of what we did and what our players did, which was entirely entertaining. Because it was just, and it was. I actually love that we didn't get into combat because it to me like that. It just showed that. It was a 3-hour session, which is short in D&D terms, let's be honest. And they killed it. Our players killed it. It was incredible. We have such an amazing cast for coming up. That game was done by our cast for our upcoming stream. And they're just incredible improv actors, role players, LARPers, all of them. And we cannot wait for January because they showed us on Sunday how awesome that it's going to be.
Yeah.
It's obviously different styles. There's some games combat intensive, combat heavy. Tomorrow we've got Clerical Error with Lauren Urban. I don't know that they've gotten into a combat yet either. It's the same thing. They love the character. It's role playing. It's still all part of the game.
And I just want to say Clerical Error is amazing. Lauren is such an amazing DM. The party there is so amazing and hilarious, and we love that show. So it's fun for us to watch.
I think we have. Speaking of Setmir, we've got the mini that you guys created for that as well. We'll show that up on the screen.
Yeah, please do. I actually have it right behind us here, actually.
and that was the one I was completely stoked to see that you guys had gone ahead and made a mini for one of the.
Yeah, of course,
NPCs.
Absolutely.
You can't give us that cool of a description for an NPC that's supposed to follow the party and not make a mini.
Yeah.
But totally kit bashed that out of like 2 or 3 different minis.
Yep. I think the basis of it was actually from the Dragon Heist, one of the terrain sets for Dragon Heist. The
mortuary graveyards.
Yeah, the mortuary graveyard area. And so we that was one of the main basis of it that we used, and it's such a great NPC, like such a great NPC.
He was a lot of fun to play.
Yeah.
for folks that might not have seen the stream, but we pulled Setmir from White Plume Mountain, and he kind of is in his coffin. But, you're out and about during the day, so how does he travel with the party? Well, the coffin has these mechanical golem legs, so it can walk around and help out. And yes, his motivations might not be as altruistic as he fits in with a lawful evil party, shall we say.
He did.
And he went after the person that let him out, which was one of the only good characters.
Good characters in the group. It was the perfect cliffhanger moment to end the game on.
Yeah.
We didn't get to everything that we had planned and made, and we were sad. But it was so entertaining, and it was literally the perfect moment to fade to black as we came to the end of our time there. It was great.
So again, if folks want to watch the archive of that game session, you go to Rock Punch ATL, and the
Correct,
video will
on
be
Twitch,
in video.
and they have it. They have the full 13 hours stream, but we also have it in the highlight section, broken down into each individual game, so that you can watch all 4 of our games that we ran. We did the Extra Life adventure from you guys. We did a pirate adventure that Devin DM'd. We did a 20th level adventure that I DM'd. And then the final game was a game of Paranoia by one of our casts for D4 that ran. That was the most craziest and insane game I have ever seen.
It is so
ever.
nuts.
If you want to laugh, please watch it. The entire, like everyone in the location where we were streaming was laughing on top of everyone else. So you can like hear us in the background laughing. It was, and the great thing about that, the donations basically shaped that story. And so they were getting, I mean, literally, it was like a revolving door as we would come in and hand the storyteller, the DM, a note every second almost, and he had this like pile of donations going, all right, this person now does this and this person does that. It was amazing. And
it was so good.
We're so happy that we got to raise that much money for the Children's Healthcare Networks. And
absolutely. And again, my heartfelt thanks again for everything that you guys have done, and that definitely extends to everyone watching who is taking part in any way whatsoever with Extra Life. The Dungeons and Dragons team overall has raised over $175,000 to date, and that is with some very, very generous Dungeons and Dragons community members participating, watching, donating, whatever it is, running live streams like yourselves. So thank you so much. It all goes to a worthy cause with the Children's Miracle Network. So.
And this was our first year with Extra Life and will not be our last. We are so happy to come on board, be a part of the Dungeons and Dragons team to help raise that. And it's not over yet. I mean, we're going to be out at Gamehole Con. We're going to keep posting our donation link. You know, $5,005 is great, but it's not enough. We want to keep going. So we're going to be pushing it still on our end on this side as well. So
please keep donating.
Yep.
Please.
Absolutely. I much seconded opinion. We're getting close to the top of the hour, so I did want to just quickly mention that Greg Tito will be on with D&D News coming up at 3 o'clock, Dice Camera Action at 4 p.m. Pacific. You can find out or continue to participate in Extra Life this weekend at Gamehole Con. Again, we've been talking about the D&D adventure that will be dropping to the DMs Guild later this week, the Lost Laboratory of Qualish. Look for it there. My thanks to everyone taking the time to watch the Dragon Plus live stream, to our followers, subscribers, our moderators. Thank you all. Really quickly for the adventure, big thanks to our playtesters as well. We had Mick Chambers and his group, Michael Porkinghorn, Mario Ortegon. I know I've seen Elwarius in chat as well. Stephen Wanzer, Matthew Dillon Main, Charles Gorin. Thank you to my donors. Just a quick shout out: Jen Roth, Shelley Mazanoble, Forrest Emerson, Mick Chambers, Ben Carver, Emmy Tanji, Matthew Miranda, Bob Nelson, Rory Filstrom, and Fred Kluth. And again, for folks that are interested in more of Dustin and Devin's live streaming efforts, look for them on the Rock Punch ATL channel in January.
And our show is called D4 because we're Dustin, we're Devin, we're going to be running Dungeons and Dragons. D4 is the name of our stream. So yeah, please tune in January 6th, 7 o'clock Eastern Time, 4 o'clock Pacific Time.
On Sundays.
All right. Well, thanks again for joining us today, gentlemen. Thanks for everything on Sunday for Extra Life, and best of luck at Gamehole Con. I wish you well there. It will be, I went to school in Madison, Wisconsin, so I do know it can be chilly, but I think it's it's still pleasant at this time.
We can't wait. It'll be our first time to Wisconsin. We're a bunch of Southern boys, so hopefully we won't, turn into too much icicles. But we're excited. Thank you so much for having us, Bart. It's been an absolute honor and a privilege to be here on Dragon Plus. Thank you so much.
Agreed.
And, thank you for the Extra Life stuff, and again, thank you everyone for donating, who donated, and thank you.
And as always, be excellent to each other.
And may you always roll with advantage.
Agreed. Thanks, everyone, and we'll take a quick break, come back with Greg Tito and the D&D News.
Woo, thanks, guys.